The doctor hesitated before saying his name, like the word itself might kill Patricia Dunn. "Larry Pope," she said. "He's the only match." Patricia laughed. Actually laughed, because the man who could save her dying daughter was the same man who didn't know that daughter existed. The same man Patricia swore she'd never need again. But her baby had hours, not days. And pride doesn't keep 8-year-olds alive. The heart monitor beeped every 2 seconds, and Patricia Dunn knew each beep was one less she'd hear. She sat in a plastic chair that had forgotten what comfort meant. The ICU was cold. Not winter cold, but hospital cold. The kind that seeps into your bones and stays there. Like warmth had been rationed somewhere else, sent to patients who still had hope. Christmas lights blinked down the hall. Cheerful. Cruel. Someone had taped a paper snowflake to the door of room 4C. Patricia stared at it until her eyes burned. Inside that room, her daughter was dying. Elaine, 8 years old, dark hair that curled at the ends, eyes that asked questions that sounded like philosophy, unconscious. Patricia leaned forward, pressed her forehead against the cold metal rail of the hospital bed. Her winter coat was still on. She'd forgotten to take it off 4 hours ago, when the world stopped making sense. "Stay," she whispered. Her breath fogged against the white sheet. "Just stay." The beeping didn't answer. She'd already made the phone calls that didn't help, already dialed her sister Ruth, whose voice cracked when she said she was booking the next flight out, already told Margie from work, who sobbed harder than Patricia did, already stood in front of doctors who explained things slowly, like grief needed subtitles, acute liver failure, genetic, aggressive, words that sounded sterile until they attached themselves to your child. Without a transplant, the doctor had said, then stopped. Because some sentences don't need endings. Patricia stared at Elaine's hand. So small. Taped. Bruised from IVs. The kind of hand that should be holding crayons, not fighting to stay alive. The smell of antiseptic mixed with pine from the hallway garland. Somewhere, a family was celebrating. Somewhere, children were asleep, waiting for Santa. Somewhere, Christmas was happening. Not here. Here, time was measured in beeps. 4 hours earlier, Patricia had been sitting in Dr. Amara Chen's office. The transplant coordinator was in her mid-40s. Kind eyes. The kind of doctor who didn't look away when delivering bad news. "There's only one match in the National Registry," Dr. Chen had said. Patricia's hands went still in her lap. "One? It's extraordinarily rare. 1 in 100,000 for this kind of tissue compatibility." Hope felt like swallowing glass. "When can we contact them?" Dr. Chen hesitated. Just a second. But Patricia saw it. The pause before detonation. "The match is someone you know." Patricia's stomach dropped. "His name is Larry Pope." The world tilted. Patricia laughed. Once, sharp, hollow, like sound escaping a wound. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking, Ms. Dunn." Dr. Chen's face stayed serious, compassionate. "His tissue profile is an exact match. We've triple-checked." Larry Pope. The name she hadn't spoken out loud in 9 years. The man whose face appeared on business magazine covers, the billionaire CEO who gave keynote speeches about vision and legacy. The man who wore tailored suits now instead of scuffed shoes, who flew private instead of driving used cars, who built empires while other people built families. The man Patricia had loved when neither of them had anything but ambition and belief. The man who did not know Elaine existed. Patricia sat frozen in that office chair, her mind racing backward through years she'd locked away. She'd met Larry before the money, before the towers, before the private jets and corner offices, back when he drank gas station coffee and talked about changing the world like it was a promise, not a brand strategy. They'd loved each other fiercely, badly. Two people sprinting in the same direction, neither willing to slow down. And when Patricia discovered she was pregnant, it was supposed to be temporary distance, just until the merger closed, just until the board voted, just until the pressure eased. Then the board voted, then Larry changed. Calls became emails, emails became silence. Patricia had left without drama, no ultimatums, no scenes, just a suitcase, a quiet apartment, and the certainty that she would not raise a child in the shadow of someone who always chose the future over the present. Elaine had been born on a rainy Tuesday. Larry was on a stage in Singapore. Patricia never called. "Miss Dunn." Dr. Chen's voice pulled her back to the present, to the ICU, to the beeping. "We need your consent to contact Mr. Pope." Patricia stared at her hands. They looked older than they should. 42 felt ancient when your child was dying. "If he says no?" Her voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Dr. Chen didn't lie, didn't soften it. "Then we keep waiting for another match." Waiting. Such a small word for such an impossible thing. Patricia looked up. "How long does Elaine have?" "Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky." Lucky. What a word. Patricia stood. Her legs felt unsteady. "Call him." The walk back to room 4C felt like miles. Patricia stopped outside the door. Through the small window, she could see Elaine's small shape under the white blanket. The monitors, the tubes, the machinery keeping her daughter alive. You know what it feels like to need someone you swore you'd never need again? That moment when pride has to die so love can live? If you've ever had to choose between your past and your child's future, you know this feeling. The one where your chest cracks open and everything you protected for years spills out. You're not alone here. Stay with me. Patricia pushed open the door, sat back down in the chair that had forgotten comfort, reached for Elaine's hand. The beeping continued. Steady. Merciless. Somewhere across the city, Dr. Chen was making a phone call. Somewhere, a phone was ringing in an office where Christmas lights sparkled against floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere, Larry Pope was about to learn he had a daughter. The phone rang 3 times. Patricia counted them in her head, though she couldn't hear them. 3 rings to collapse 9 years into 3 seconds. Larry Pope answered. He almost didn't. His assistant Kendra had marked the number as unknown, flagged it as spam, but something made him pick up. Later, he wouldn't be able to explain what. Instinct, maybe. Or fate. Or the universe deciding it was time to collect a debt. Yes? His voice clipped, distracted. Still working on Christmas Eve, because that's what men like Larry Pope did. "My name is Patricia Dunn." Silence. 5 seconds. 10. The kind of silence that happens when a name reaches through time and grabs you by the throat. "Patricia?" His voice changed. Careful now, like he was testing the weight of a word. "Patricia Dunn?" "I'm at St. Agnes Hospital," she said. Her voice steady, calm. The way you talk when you've run out of other options. "In the ICU, with our daughter." The words landed like dropped glass. Somewhere in that corner office, Larry Pope went completely still. He couldn't finish, couldn't push the word past his teeth. "Her name is Elaine," Patricia said. "She's 8 years old. She has your eyes, your chin, that same little crease between her eyebrows when she's thinking." The beeping continued. "She's dying, Larry. Acute liver failure. And you're the only match." More silence. Then, barely audible. "I'm coming." The line went dead. Patricia set down her phone, looked at Elaine, at the paper snowflake on the door, at the Christmas lights blinking their relentless cheer down the hall. She didn't cry. Not yet. Because crying meant accepting that this was real, that the man she'd walked away from 9 years ago was about to walk back into her life, that her daughter's survival was tied to someone who'd chosen everything else over them. But here's what Patricia understood in that moment, sitting in that cold plastic chair. Love isn't fair. It doesn't care about pride or history or who hurt who. It just asks one question. What are you willing to sacrifice? Patricia looked at her daughter. Everything. The answer was everything. 3 hours later, the ICU doors opened. Larry Pope walked in. He still wore his tailored coat. Charcoal gray, probably worth more than Patricia's monthly rent. But his hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking. He looked like a man who'd just discovered he'd been living the wrong life. He stopped in the doorway of room 4C. Patricia watched him see Elaine for the first time. Watched his knees buckle. Watched him catch himself on the doorframe. Because Elaine didn't look like the photos in his wallet. He didn't have any. She looked like him. Undeniably. Impossible to explain away. Same dark eyes, same chin, same faint crease between the brows. Larry's mouth opened. No sound came out. Patricia didn't say "I told you so," didn't say "you should have known," didn't say any of the things she'd imagined saying for 9 years. She just looked at him and said 2 words. She's dying. And that's where everything changed. Because what happened next, what Larry Pope did in the hours that followed, would test everything he thought he knew about himself. The phone rang 3 times before Larry Pope answered. And in those 3 rings, 9 years collapsed into 3 seconds. But what neither of them knew yet was that saving Elaine's life was the easy part. Learning to be a family? That would take everything they had. Larry Pope answered the phone himself. He almost didn't. And that almost would have killed a child he didn't know existed. His office sat 43 floors above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a painting he'd commissioned, but never looked at. Christmas lights twinkled below, families heading home, children clutching packages, couples walking arm in arm through snow that hadn't started falling yet but would. Larry saw none of it. He was still working. 8:23 on Christmas Eve, and he was still at his desk. Because that's what men like Larry Pope did. They built empires while other people built memories. The phone on his desk buzzed. Unknown number. His assistant Kendra had flagged it. Probably spam, probably nothing. Larry's finger hovered over the decline button, but something stopped him. Later, he wouldn't be able to explain it. Instinct, maybe, or the universe deciding it was time to collect a debt. His hand trembled slightly as he answered. He noticed the area code first. Local. St. Agnes Hospital. His throat tightened. Yes? My name is Patricia Dunn. The world stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Like someone had pressed pause on his entire existence. 5 seconds of silence. 10. Larry's mouth went dry. The coffee cup in his other hand suddenly felt too heavy. He set it down carefully, like any sudden movement might shatter something fragile. Patricia? His voice came out different. Careful. Testing the weight of a name he hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. Patricia Dunn. I'm at St. Agnes, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that happens when you've run out of other options. In the ICU, with our daughter. The words landed like dropped glass. Our daughter. The city lights blurred. Larry stood without meaning to. His chair rolled backward and hit the credenza. Our what? Her name is Elaine. Patricia's voice didn't waver. She's 8 years old. She has your eyes, Larry. Your chin. That same little crease between her eyebrows when she's thinking. 8 years old. The math computed instantly in Larry's mind. 9 years since Patricia had walked away. 9 years since he'd last seen her face, heard her voice, felt her presence in a room. 9 years since he'd chosen a merger over a marriage that never happened. His legs wouldn't hold him. He sank back into his chair. She's dying, Patricia continued. Matter of fact, like she was reading a grocery list instead of destroying his world. Acute liver failure, genetic, aggressive, and according to the transplant coordinator, you're the only match in the entire national registry. Larry's mind raced backward, through years, through decisions, through the moments that led to this phone call. He'd met Patricia 10 years ago at a pitch competition in a hotel conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. She'd been standing near the beverage table, juggling a folder, her phone, and a too-full cup of coffee. When she'd turned, the coffee had gone everywhere, splashing across his prototype, his shirt, his carefully rehearsed confidence. She'd been mortified. He'd been charmed. "Let me buy you another coffee," he'd said. "Let me buy you a new shirt," she'd countered. He'd hired her 2 weeks later. Not because of the coffee. Because she was brilliant. Because she saw possibilities where others saw problems. Because when she walked into a room, the air changed. They'd loved each other fiercely, badly. Two people sprinting toward the same horizon, neither willing to slow down, neither realizing they were running in slightly different directions. When Patricia told him she was pregnant, Larry had been in the middle of merger negotiations. The biggest deal of his career. The board was watching. Investors were circling. Everything he'd worked for was finally within reach. "We'll figure it out," he'd told her. "Just give me a few weeks. Just until the board votes. Just until the pressure eases." But the board voted. And then there was another deal. Another meeting. Another reason to say later. Calls became emails. Emails became texts. Texts became silence. Patricia had left on a Thursday. Larry found out on a Friday when he came home to an empty apartment. No note in the kitchen. No drama, no ultimatums, just absence where presence used to be. He'd told himself she'd come back, that she just needed space, that once the IPO closed, once the stock stabilized, once things calmed down, she'd understand. Elaine was born on a rainy Tuesday in April. Larry was on a stage in Singapore, giving a keynote about vision and legacy to 3,000 people who'd paid $500 a ticket to hear him speak. Patricia never called, and Larry, God help him, had been relieved. How many of you made a choice like that? Walked away from someone not because the love died, but because you loved someone else more? That's the part they don't tell you about motherhood. Sometimes protection looks like silence. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave. If that landed somewhere deep, I see you. You're not alone in understanding this. Larry? Patricia's voice pulled him back to the present, to the phone pressed against his ear, to the reality that he had a daughter, a dying daughter. How old? His voice cracked. I just told you. 8. Why? He couldn't finish the sentence. Why didn't you tell me? Why now? Why did you take her from me? But he knew the answers. All of them. Why are you calling now? He asked instead. Because she's dying. Patricia's composure cracked, just slightly, just enough for him to hear the fear underneath. Because you're the only match. Because I don't have a choice. In the background, Larry heard another voice. Female. Professional. Mr. Pope, this is Dr. Amara Chen. We need to begin compatibility confirmation tonight. Every hour matters. Every hour matters. 8 years of hours he'd missed. 8 years of birthdays and first days of school and bedtime stories and scraped knees and questions about why the sky was blue. 8 years of a life that existed without him because he'd been too busy building a legacy to notice he'd already created one. I'm coming. The words came out before his brain caught up. Don't do anything. I'm coming. He hung up. Stood there in his corner office with his floor-to-ceiling windows and his city view legacy and his empty, perfect life. The coffee in his cup had gone cold. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. His legs finally remembered how to move. He grabbed his coat. Didn't tell Kendra. Didn't lock his computer. Didn't turn off the lights. Just walked out of the office like a man fleeing a building that was already burning down. The elevator ride down 43 floors took forever. The drive to St. Agnes took 3 hours that felt like 3 years. Larry arrived still wearing his tailored coat. Charcoal gray, custom made, worth more than most people's monthly rent. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, his tie hanging loose around his neck like he'd forgotten how to be the person he'd spent 9 years becoming. He walked through the ICU doors like a man who'd just discovered he'd been living the wrong life. When he reached room 4C, he stopped in the doorway, and what he saw broke something in him that money couldn't fix. Larry Pope had built a fortune by never hesitating. But when he saw Elaine's face for the first time, he couldn't move. He stood in the doorway of room 4C at exactly 11:52 on Christmas Eve. His security badge hung crooked on his coat pocket. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, a sound he'd never noticed before but would never forget. Elaine looked nothing like the photos in his wallet. He didn't have any photos. She looked like him. Same dark eyes, same strong chin, same faint crease between her eyebrows, even now while she slept. While machines breathed for her, while time ran out in 2-second intervals marked by relentless beeping. She was impossibly small in that hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that displayed numbers Larry didn't understand, but knew were bad. Her dark hair fanned across the pillow. One small hand lay outside the blanket, taped and bruised from IVs. His daughter. The word felt foreign in his mind. Heavy. Real. Larry's knees buckled. He caught himself on the doorframe, his expensive Italian shoes sliding slightly on the polished floor. His vision blurred at the edges. His chest felt like someone had reached inside and was squeezing his heart with a fist. Patricia watched him from her chair beside the bed. Her face showed no anger, no satisfaction at his pain. Just exhaustion. And fact. "She's dying," she said. And in that moment, Larry Pope, who'd negotiated with presidents, who'd closed billion-dollar deals, who'd given speeches to thousands without notes, had no words. The door opened behind him. Dr. Amara Chen entered, her footsteps quiet but purposeful. She carried a tablet and wore the kind of calm that came from years of delivering impossible news. "Mr. Pope," she gestured to the hallway, "we need to discuss the procedure." Larry followed her like a man in a dream, or a nightmare. He couldn't tell which. They stood in the hallway where the Christmas decorations seemed obscene in their cheerfulness. Dr. Chen pulled up images on her tablet, diagrams of livers, surgical plans, risk assessments. "It's called a living donor transplant," she explained. "We'd perform a partial hepatectomy, remove approximately 60% of your liver and transplant it to Elaine. Your liver will regenerate within 6 to 8 weeks. And hers? If her body accepts it, she has a 90% survival rate. But we need to operate within 48 hours. Her liver function is deteriorating rapidly." Larry stared at the diagram without seeing it. "The risks? For you, infection, bleeding, bile leakage. There's a 1% mortality rate for the donor." Dr. Chen's voice remained steady. Professional. "For Elaine, without the transplant, she has days. Maybe a week if we're lucky." Days. His daughter had days. "When can we start?" Larry asked. "First, we need to confirm compatibility. Blood work, tissue typing, cross-matching. It'll take a few hours." "Then let's start." Dr. Chen nodded and led him to a pre-op room down the hall. A phlebotomist appeared. Young, efficient, anonymous. Larry sat in the chair and rolled up his sleeve. Watched his blood fill vial after vial. Dark red. The same blood that apparently ran through Elaine's veins. When the phlebotomist left, Larry sat alone. The consent forms lay on the table beside him. Dense paragraphs of medical jargon and legal disclaimers. He should read them. He'd built a career on reading the fine print. But the words blurred together. The door opened. A nurse entered. Older, kind eyes. A name tag that read Clayton. He set down a cup of coffee without a word, met Larry's eyes, nodded once, then left. Some things didn't need saying. Larry's mind drifted backward again, to 9 years ago, to the conversation that ended everything. Patricia had been 7 months pregnant. Larry remembered because she'd been wearing that blue maternity dress she'd bought on sale, the one she said made her feel less like a whale and more like a person. He'd been on the phone. Always on the phone. Some investor from Tokyo who only took calls at midnight. "Larry, we need to talk about the nursery," Patricia had said. He'd held up one finger. "Wait." She'd waited. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 20. When he finally hung up, she'd tried again. The baby comes in 8 weeks. We need to... I can't do this right now. Patricia. His voice had been sharp, impatient. Can we talk about this after the IPO? After. That word. That promise that wasn't really a promise. Patricia had gone very still. There's always an after with you, isn't it? After the meeting, after the deal, after the board, after the IPO. That's not fair. Neither is this. She'd stood, her hand on her swollen belly. I'm not asking you to choose between the company and the baby. I'm asking you to make room for both. But you've already decided there's only space for one. She'd packed that night while he was back on the phone. Quietly, methodically, taking only what was hers. By morning, she was gone. See, what Patricia understood, and what took Larry 9 years to learn, is that later is a promise people break without even knowing it. If you've ever been someone's later, this story is for you. And if you've ever been the person who said later, this might hurt. But sometimes we need stories that hurt before they heal. The door opened again. Dr. Chen. Her expression was carefully neutral. The results are back, she said. Larry stood so fast the chair scraped backward. You're a perfect match. 10 out of 10 markers. It's extraordinarily rare. Surgery can proceed as soon as you give consent. Larry exhaled. When? Mr. Pope. Dr. Chen's voice softened. You need to understand what you're agreeing to. This is major surgery. There are real risks. You need to decide. Can I see her again? Larry interrupted. Before I decide? Dr. Chen nodded and left to arrange it. Larry walked back to room 4C. Patricia was standing now, her arms crossed. She looked at him with something between hope and fury. The nurse said you wanted to see her again. Her voice was tight. Before you decide. I just need... You're deciding? Patricia's eyes flashed. She took a step toward him. My daughter is dying, and you're deciding? Patricia, you don't get to decide, Larry. The words came out like bullets, 9 years of silence erupting in the space between them. You lost that right when you chose a boardroom over a heartbeat, when you picked investors over your own child, when you said later so many times that later never came. Larry took it. All of it. Every word deserved. Every accusation true. When she finally stopped, breathing hard, he spoke quietly. You're right. I don't get to decide. But I'm asking anyway. Let me see her. Then I'll sign. Patricia stared at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Larry approached the bed. This time his knees held. He sat in the chair Patricia had been occupying for hours, looked at Elaine's face, peaceful in unconsciousness, unaware that her life hung in the balance of a stranger's choice. Not a stranger. Her father. He reached out slowly, carefully, touched her hand. It was impossibly small in his, warm, alive. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Her chest rose and fell. Larry leaned closer. I don't know if you can hear me, he whispered. His voice cracked. But I'm your dad. And I'm late. I'm so late, but I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. He sat there for 10 minutes. 20. Patricia watched from the doorway. At 3:47 a.m. on Christmas morning, Larry Pope stood, walked to the nurse's station, asked for the consent forms. He signed them without reading a single word, because for the first time in his life, Larry Pope understood what it meant to not have a choice. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the hardest part wasn't the surgery. It was what came after. They wheeled Larry Pope into surgery at 6:02 on Christmas morning. Patricia watched them take him, and for 5 seconds, she almost said thank you. Almost. The word stuck in her throat like glass she couldn't swallow, because thanking him felt like forgiving him, and she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. 2 operating rooms had been prepared simultaneously. Larry in OR1, Elaine in OR2. Surgical teams moved with choreographed precision, nurses checking instruments, anesthesiologists reviewing charts. surgeons scrubbing in like they were preparing for battle. The air smelled of antiseptic and something else Patricia couldn't name. Finality, maybe. Or hope. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. The cold air raised goosebumps on her arms. She'd finally taken off her coat. Someone, a nurse whose name she'd already forgotten, had brought her a hospital blanket. It smelled like industrial detergent and 1,000 other people's fear. When the OR doors swung shut behind Larry's gurney, Patricia stood frozen in the hallway, watching red lights blink above both doors, listening to muffled voices and the hiss of ventilation systems. A nurse touched her elbow. "The surgical waiting room is this way." Patricia followed. The waiting room was exactly what every hospital waiting room was. Lime green chairs that had seen better decades. A coffee table stacked with magazines from 2 years ago. A vending machine humming in the corner like it had a grudge against silence. Patricia sat. Stared at the wall. The clock read 6:15 a.m. 14 hours, Dr. Amara had said. Maybe more. 14 hours of not knowing. The automatic doors whooshed open. Ruth stumbled through them, dragging a small suitcase, her mascara smudged from crying on the plane, her hair escaping its bun in every direction. "Trish." She dropped everything and wrapped her arms around Patricia. Patricia let herself be held, just for a moment, just long enough to remember what it felt like to not carry everything alone. "Any news?" Ruth whispered. "They just went in." Ruth nodded and sat beside her, keeping one hand locked around Patricia's. An hour later, Margie arrived with 2 thermoses of soup nobody would eat and a bag of muffins nobody wanted. But she'd come, and that mattered. The 3 women sat in those lime green chairs and waited. Hour 3 arrived with no updates. Patricia couldn't sit anymore. She paced the length of the waiting room. 12 steps to the window. 12 steps back. Over and over, until Ruth said gently, "You're going to wear a hole in the floor." "Remember when Elaine dressed as a pickle for Halloween?" Ruth tried, her voice too bright. "She was 4, insisted on being a pickle. Not a princess, not a fairy, a pickle." Patricia almost smiled. The memory flickered. Elaine's little face peering out of green felt so proud of her costume choice, so completely herself even then. But that smile died fast, because the waiting room door opened. And the look on the nurse's face made Patricia's blood freeze. "Ms. Dunn." The nurse's voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came before bad news. Patricia couldn't breathe. "There's been a..." the nurse started. "What happened?" Patricia's voice didn't sound like hers. "Not a complication. An update. Mr. Pope's liver is larger than the scans indicated. That's good for Elaine. She'll get more tissue. But it means the surgery will take longer for him. Dr. Chen wanted you to know we're adding 2 to 3 hours to the estimate." Patricia exhaled, nodded. Her legs felt like water. "Everything is proceeding normally," the nurse added. "Both patients are stable." When she left, Patricia sank back into the chair. Ruth squeezed her hand. Neither spoke. Hour 7 found Patricia in the hospital chapel. She didn't believe in God. Hadn't since her mother died when Patricia was 16. But there was nowhere else to go. The waiting room felt too small, the hallways too loud, her own mind too crowded. The chapel was empty, wooden pews that had absorbed decades of desperate prayers, dusty hymn books in the racks, candles flickering on a small altar, a stained glass window showing some St. Patricia didn't recognize. She sat in the back row. What do you say to a God you stopped believing in? Do you apologize for the years of silence? Negotiate like you're closing a deal? Beg? Patricia did all 3. "I don't know if you're listening," she whispered to the empty room. "I don't know if you're even there. But if you are, please, not her. Take me if you want someone. But not her. She's 8. She's never hurt anyone. She draws pictures of nurses and asks questions about stars and still believes people are good. Please." The candles flickered. Nothing answered. You know what waiting does? It strips everything down to the truth. No distractions, no busy. Just you and the thing you're most afraid of. Every single person watching this has waited for news they were terrified to hear. That's why we're here together. That's why this community matters. If you've found something real here, don't just watch. Subscribe. Because the women in this space? We hold each other up when the waiting gets too heavy. Patricia returned to the waiting room. Ruth was there, holding 2 cups of terrible coffee. "I thought you might need this," Ruth said. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ruth spoke quietly. "I envied you." Patricia looked at her. "What?" "When you left Larry. When you walked away. I envied you." Ruth stared at her coffee cup. "I stayed in my marriage 15 years too long because I was afraid to be alone. You were braver than me." Patricia reached for her sister's hand. "You're not alone now?" Ruth's eyes filled. "Neither are you." Small moment, huge weight. Hour 11, hour 12, hour 13. The clock on the wall moved like it was stuck in honey. Patricia watched every minute crawl by. Ruth dozed in the chair beside her. Margie had left to check on Patricia's apartment, water the plants, grab clean clothes. Hour 14. The waiting room doors opened. A surgeon emerged, still in scrubs, mask pulled down, surgical cap covering his hair, his face unreadable. Patricia stood so fast her chair tipped backward. Ruth grabbed her hand. The surgeon looked at Patricia. His eyes tired but clear. It worked. Silence. Patricia heard the words but couldn't process them. They hung in the air like something she needed to catch but didn't know how. "Both surgeries successful," the surgeon continued. "Mr. Pope's liver was an excellent specimen. We were able to transplant a generous portion to Elaine. Her body accepted it immediately. No complications during the procedure." Patricia's knees gave out. She slid down the wall and sobbed. Ruth caught her, held her, let her break. "They're both in recovery," the surgeon said gently. "We'll monitor closely over the next 24 hours, but all indicators are positive." Patricia couldn't speak, could only nod, could only cry. An hour later, Dr. Amara found Patricia in the hallway outside recovery. "They're both stable," she said. "Mr. Pope is pale and will be in significant pain, but he's alive. Elaine's color is already returning. Her liver function is stabilizing. She's breathing on her own." "Her body is accepting it?" Patricia's voice cracked. "We'll know more in 24 hours. But yes, so far her body is accepting it beautifully." Patricia pressed her hand to her mouth. "Can I see them?" "One at a time." Patricia stood there for a long moment, then walked toward Larry's recovery room first. Not because she forgave him, not because she owed him, but because he gave part of himself to save the person she loved most. And that deserved to be witnessed. Elaine woke up 6 hours after Larry did, and the first words out of her mouth changed everything. Patricia had been sitting in the same chair for 18 hours. Her back ached. Her eyes burned. Her hand was wrapped around Elaine's, the way it had been since they'd wheeled her daughter back from recovery. At 2:17 a.m. on December 26th, Elaine's eyes fluttered open. "Mommy?" The word came out small, hoarse, the most beautiful sound Patricia had ever heard. Patricia broke. Every wall she'd built, every bit of strength she'd borrowed, every ounce of control she'd maintained, gone. She pressed Elaine's hand to her cheek and sobbed. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Elaine blinked slowly, trying to focus. The room was too bright. Everything hurt. But her mom was there. Then, with perfect 8-year-old logic, Elaine asked, "Did Santa come?" Patricia laughed through tears. The sound was half sob, half joy, entirely relief. "Yes, he came." Elaine tried to smile, but winced. Her hand moved to her stomach, where the surgical site throbbed under bandages. "Why does it hurt?" Patricia brushed hair from Elaine's forehead, her touch gentle. "You were very sick, sweetheart. Your liver stopped working, but someone gave you part of theirs to make you better." Elaine's eyes widened despite the pain. "Like a superhero?" "Yeah. Patricia's voice cracked. Like a superhero. Elaine was quiet for a moment, processing this with the seriousness she brought to everything. Can I meet them? Patricia's breath caught. She'd known this moment was coming, had practiced what to say. None of it felt adequate now. Yes. Would you like to? Elaine nodded. An hour later, Dr. Amara bent the rules. Patricia wheeled Elaine down the hallway in a wheelchair, an IV pole attached, a blanket tucked around her small frame. They moved slowly. Every bump made Elaine wince, but she didn't complain. Larry's room was 3 doors down. Patricia stopped at the doorway. Larry was awake, pale. Monitors beeped beside his bed, tracking vitals that were still fragile. He had tubes running from his arms, a drainage bag by the bed, surgical dressings visible where his hospital gown gaped. But his eyes were clear. And when Patricia wheeled Elaine into view, he went completely still. This was the moment. Larry and Elaine, both conscious, both alive, both looking at each other for the first time as people, not medical crises. Elaine lifted one small hand, waved, tiny, tentative. Larry waved back, his hand shaking from pain and medication and something that looked like wonder. Are you the superhero? Elaine asked. Larry's voice broke when he answered. No, you are. Elaine looked confused. But Mommy said you gave me— I just helped a little, Larry interrupted softly. But you're the one who has to be brave now. You're the one doing the hard part. Elaine considered this. Then, what's your name? Larry. Not Dad. Not yet. Just Larry. Thank you, Larry, Elaine said with the politeness Patricia had taught her. For helping. Larry pressed his hand to his mouth, nodded because he couldn't speak. Recovery week 1 was measured in small victories. Day 1, Larry managed 10 steps with a walker before the pain became too much. Elaine ate 3 spoonfuls of orange jello, her favorite, before exhaustion won. Day 2, Elaine asked for her sketchbook, drew a picture of the nurses. Larry spent an hour in physical therapy learning to move without tearing his stitches. Day 3, they both had blood drawn. Both grimaced. Both survived. Patricia watched it all, torn between gratitude that they were alive and grief over what this all meant. Larry wasn't a stranger anymore. He was part of their story now, literally part of Elaine's body. You can't erase someone who's written into your daughter's DNA. Day 4, Patricia visited Larry's room during Elaine's afternoon nap. He was sitting up, finally, the color slowly returning to his face. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was quiet, not accusing, just asking. Patricia didn't flinch. Because you weren't there to tell. I would have come back. For how long? Patricia crossed her arms. A week? A month? Until the next board meeting? Until Singapore called again? Silence. Then Patricia unleashed 9 years. All the birthdays he'd missed. The first steps she'd videoed alone. The first words, Mama and Bird and more. The first day of school when Patricia had cried in the parking lot because her baby was growing up, and there was no one to share it with. You don't get to be a hero now, Larry. Heroes show up. You disappeared. Larry took it. Every word. No defense, no excuses. When she finally stopped, he said simply, You're right. Pause. But I'm asking for permission now. To stay. To try. Here's the thing about second chances. They're not about erasing the first ending. They're about whether you're brave enough to write a different second chapter. Not everyone deserves one. But some do. What do you think? Does Larry deserve his? Tell me in the comments. And share this with someone who believes in second chances. Or someone who needs to hear they don't have to give one. Day 6. Morning routine. Patricia was helping Elaine wash her face, the careful movements they'd learned to avoid pulling stitches. Is Larry my daddy? Elaine asked suddenly. Patricia's hands froze over the washcloth. Biologically, yes. What's biologically mean? Patricia sat on the edge of the hospital bed, choosing words carefully. It means he's part of the reason you exist. His DNA is in you, especially now. But being a dad is more than biology. What else is it? Showing up? Being there? Reading stories and fixing breakfast and helping with homework. Dad is something you earn. Elaine was quiet, thinking this through with that old soul seriousness. Is he going to be more? Patricia answered honestly. I don't know yet, baby. Day 8, late evening. Patricia had left Elaine's room to grab coffee from the vending machine down the hall. On her way back, she passed Larry's room and heard a voice. She stopped, peeked through the partially open door. Elaine was there. Somehow she'd snuck out of her room despite the IVs and bandages, curled carefully in the chair beside Larry's bed. Larry was holding a book Patricia recognized immediately. Where the Wild Things Are. He was reading, doing voices, making the monsters sound ridiculous, making Elaine giggle, that beautiful sound Patricia hadn't heard in weeks. And Max said, "Let the wild rumpus start." Larry's monster voice was terrible. Perfect. Elaine laughed, then clutched her stomach. Ow, don't make me laugh. Sorry. But Larry was smiling. Patricia stood in the doorway, unseen. Something in her chest cracked open. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something softer than the anger she'd carried for 9 years. What Patricia didn't know was that Elaine had already decided. Kids don't measure love in years or apologies. They measure it in showing up. And Larry? He was learning to show up. Larry Pope knew how to run a company. He had no idea how to braid hair. 22 days post-surgery. Discharge day. The hospital that had become their temporary world was releasing them back to reality. Both cleared medically. Both healing. Both fundamentally changed. Larry was going back to his penthouse, 43 floors of glass and steel and carefully curated emptiness. Elaine was going home to Patricia's modest 2-bedroom apartment where the walls held memories and the refrigerator displayed crayon drawings held up by magnets. They stood at the hospital entrance. Winter air bit at their faces. Patricia adjusted Elaine's coat, careful around the healing incision, while Larry waited awkwardly with his discharge papers. Elaine looked up at Larry. Then, without warning, she moved forward and wrapped her arms around his waist. The first physical affection she'd initiated. Larry froze. Then his hands came down gently on her shoulders. His eyes went wet. "Bye, Larry," Elaine said into his coat. "Bye, Elaine." His voice barely held. Patricia watched this, felt something shift in her chest that she wasn't ready to name. "You can visit," she heard herself say. "If you want." Larry's eyes found hers. "I want." 3 days later, Larry stood outside Patricia's apartment holding flowers and feeling ridiculous. The flowers were for Patricia, not roses, nothing presumptuous, just yellow tulips, because he'd once remembered her saying she liked them. The art supplies under his other arm were for Elaine, expensive markers and sketch paper his assistant had helped him pick out. Patricia opened the door, looked at the flowers, at him. Something in her expression softened slightly. "Come in." The apartment was small, lived in, warm in the way his penthouse would never be. Photos on the walls. Elaine at every age he'd missed. A bookshelf crammed with children's books. A kitchen table with homework still scattered across it. Crayon drawings on the refrigerator held by alphabet magnets. This is what home looks like, Larry thought, and I've never had it. "Larry!" Elaine appeared from her bedroom, moving carefully but with more energy than he'd seen. "You came!" "I brought you something." He handed her the art supplies. Elaine's face lit up. "Mom, look! The good markers!" "What do you say?" Patricia prompted. "Thank you." Elaine was already opening the package. "Want to see my drawings?" Larry followed her to the living room, sat on the couch because he genuinely didn't know how to sit on the floor where Elaine had spread her sketchbook. She showed him page after page. The nurses from the hospital, drawn with surprising detail, the paper snowflake from the ICU door. And then, a tall man with dark eyes and a strong chin, standing next to a small girl. "Is that..." Larry couldn't finish. You, Elaine said simply. With me. Larry's throat closed. Patricia watched from the kitchen doorway, part protective, part curious. Watching them together was like watching someone learn a language they should have been born speaking. What's your favorite color? Larry asked, trying to navigate this new territory. Yellow, Elaine answered. Like sunshine. Yellow. He hadn't known. Didn't know she hated carrots but loved broccoli. Didn't know she was afraid of the dark but not of thunderstorms. Didn't know her favorite book, or her best friend's name, or what she wanted to be when she grew up. He knew nothing. But he was learning. Larry's phone rang. Then again, Patricia tensed. Here it was, the moment when the real world intruded and reminded them that this was temporary. That Larry had a life that didn't include sitting on couches looking at crayon drawings. Kendra's name flashed on the screen. Board meeting, merger deadline, Singapore conference call. Larry looked at the phone. At Elaine showing him her painting. At Patricia watching to see what he'd choose. He silenced it. Sorry, he said to Elaine. You were showing me your painting? Small moment. Enormous signal. An hour later, as Larry was preparing to leave, Elaine asked, Can you come to my school thing? Patricia tensed. Elaine, Larry's probably... What school thing? Larry interrupted. We're doing presentations about our families. I could talk about you. The superhero liver man. Elaine's eyes were bright with possibility. Larry looked at Patricia. She crossed her arms. It's in 2 weeks. You're probably busy. I'll be there, Larry said. The 2 weeks that followed built something fragile and real. Larry visited 4 times, learned to play Go Fish, and lost every game because Elaine was unnervingly good at it. Attended physical therapy appointments with her, both of them still healing, both working to rebuild strength. Brought soup on a bad pain day when Elaine couldn't eat anything else. Consistency. That's what Patricia was watching for. And despite herself, she was seeing it. The school presentation arrived on a Tuesday morning. 8 weeks post-transplant, Elaine's first full day back with medical clearance. The classroom was small, bright with construction paper art projects and alphabet posters. Parents lined the back wall. Larry stood next to Patricia, feeling out of place among mothers in yoga pants and fathers in work casual. Elaine walked to the front, holding a poster board. Patricia had helped her with it. Photos of the 2 of them through the years. And one new addition. A photo Ruth had taken in the hospital of Larry, in his recovery bed. Elaine in the wheelchair beside him. This is my family, Elaine began, her voice small but steady. This is my mom. She works planning events and makes the best grilled cheese. This is my Aunt Ruth, who lives in Boston, and sends me books. She pointed to the hospital photo. This is Larry. He gave me part of his liver when I was sick. Now we match. One of the kids raised a hand. Is he your dad? The classroom went quiet. Patricia's breath caught. Larry's hands clenched at his sides. Elaine looked back at Larry, held his gaze. He's learning to be. Larry's eyes flooded. He didn't bother wiping them. After the presentation, the parking lot, Patricia and Larry standing by their separate cars, other parents filing past, some offering congratulations, others just curious stares. She's getting attached, Patricia said quietly. Is that okay? I don't know. Patricia's voice was honest. Raw. What happens when the board calls? When Singapore needs you? When being a father gets inconvenient? Larry took a breath. I resigned. Patricia went completely still. What? Last week. Stepped down as CEO. I'm consulting part-time, setting my own hours. I can't get back 9 years, Patricia. I can't undo choosing wrong. But I can be here for the rest. Patricia stared at him. At this man who'd built an empire and was dismantling it piece by piece for a daughter he'd only known 3 weeks. She didn't say it was enough. Didn't say she forgave him. But she nodded. Once. And for Larry Pope, that nod was everything. But what neither of them saw coming was the call Patricia got 3 days later, the one that would test exactly how committed Larry really was. The call came at 4:47 a.m. The same hospital, the same floor. But this time, it wasn't Elaine. Patricia's phone buzzed on her nightstand. She grabbed it before the second ring, heart already racing. Caller ID, St. Agnes Hospital. Her first thought? Elaine. But Elaine was at Ruth's house, safe, sleeping. Ms. Dunn? A nurse's voice. Professional. Careful. Is it Elaine? Patricia was already out of bed, pulling on clothes. No, it's Larry Pope. He's been admitted. Complications from the transplant. He listed you as his emergency contact. Patricia froze, one arm in her jacket. What kind of complications? Dr. Chen will explain when you arrive. But Ms. Dunn, you should come now. The line went dead. Patricia drove through empty streets at 5 in the morning, the same route she'd taken on Christmas Eve. Déjà vu wrapped around her like a cold blanket. Same hospital. Same waiting room. Same antiseptic smell. Different fear. Amara Chen met her in the hallway, her face showing the exhaustion of being called in at dawn. Bile leak, she explained. It's a known complication, but Larry's developed an infection. We need to operate immediately to repair the leak and clean the infection before it spreads. How bad? Patricia's voice came out steadier than she felt. 60% success rate. His system is already compromised from the first surgery. The risks are higher this time. Higher. The word echoed in Patricia's head. Higher chance of dying, higher stakes. Where is he? Dr. Chen led her to a pre-op room. Larry lay on the bed, pale and feverish, connected to monitors that beeped warnings Patricia had learned to dread. His eyes were glassy with pain and medication. Didn't think you'd come, he said weakly. Patricia pulled a chair to his bedside. You're my daughter's father. Where else would I be? That's not why I listed you. Patricia went still. Larry's eyes found hers. I listed you because you're the person I want to see if I don't wake up. The machines beeped. Fluorescent lights hummed. The world narrowed to this room, this moment, this man who kept choosing her even when she hadn't chosen him back yet. Patricia sat. Larry kept talking, his words loose with morphine but devastatingly honest. I was terrified of you, he confessed. Of us. Of failing you. So I failed you on purpose. Controlled the ending before you could leave me anyway. Patricia's throat tightened. But Elaine? Larry's voice cracked. She gave me a reason to be brave. And you were always the bravest person I knew. I just couldn't match it. Until now. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway. Mr. Pope, we need to move. Patricia stood, but Larry's hand caught hers. Patricia, you don't get to die, she interrupted, her voice fierce. Not after making her love you, not after making me... She couldn't finish. The words stuck. Larry's hand squeezed hers weakly. After making you what? Patricia leaned down. Her whisper meant only for him. Hope. They wheeled him away at 5:45 a.m. Patricia called Ruth from the waiting room. Don't tell Elaine yet. Just keep her busy. I'll call when I know something. 6 hours stretched ahead. Patricia knew this room now. The lime green chairs, the vending machine, the magazines no one read. She'd lived a lifetime in this room already. She didn't go to the chapel this time. Somehow, talking to God felt less urgent than talking to herself. Working through the math of what she felt. What she'd been feeling but refusing to name. Nurse Clayton appeared at hour 3, set down coffee without a word, nodded once, left. Some things didn't need saying. Patricia's mind drifted to 9 years ago, to the note she'd left on the kitchen counter. She could still remember writing it, her hand shaking, her belly heavy with Elaine. Larry at the office closing another deal that mattered more than coming home. I can't compete with your future, but our baby deserves someone who chooses them first. Don't look for us. She'd folded it once, left it by the coffee maker where he'd find it eventually. Then she'd sat in her car for an hour before she could drive away, crying until her eyes burned, until her chest ached, until she'd emptied out enough grief to make room for resolve. She'd chosen Elaine over him, and she'd been right to. But now, hour 5 of surgery, sitting in this waiting room again, Patricia realized something with crushing clarity. If Larry died, she wouldn't just lose Elaine's father. She'd lose something for herself. The possibility of second chapters, of people changing, of love that survived its own ending and came back different, better. She didn't want him gone. Not for Elaine, for her. The realization sat heavy in her chest. Terrifying. True. At hour 6, the doors opened. Dr. Amara emerged, still in scrubs, surgical cap pushed back. Her face was tired, but relieved. Patricia stood on legs that barely held her. He made it. Dr. Chen's voice was steady. It was close. The infection was more extensive than the scans showed, but we repaired the leak, cleaned everything out. He's stable. Patricia exhaled 9 years of held breath. Can I see him? Give them 20 minutes to get him settled in recovery. Patricia nodded, sat back down. Her hands were shaking. This time she wasn't going to his room out of duty, not because he'd saved Elaine, not because she owed him. She was going because when Dr. Chen said he made it, Patricia's first thought had been, thank God. I'm not ready to lose him yet. 23 minutes later, Patricia pushed open the door to Larry's recovery room. He was pale, stitched again. New bandages over old scars, but breathing, alive. His eyes were closed. The monitors beeped steadily, the sound that measured life continuing. Patricia stood there, watching him. This man who'd left her, who'd come back, who'd given part of himself to save their daughter, who'd resigned from an empire to sit on floors and play Go Fish and show up consistently. Even when it was hard, something inside her made a decision her brain hadn't caught up to yet. But first, there was someone else who needed to see him, someone who'd been practicing a very important word. Patricia pulled out her phone and texted Ruth. Bring Elaine. He's okay. She needs to see him. Ruth replied immediately. She's been asking about him all morning. We'll be there in 30. Patricia looked back at Larry, touched his hand gently, careful of the IV. You're going to get to hear it, she whispered. What she's been wanting to call you. And for the first time in 9 years, Patricia smiled, thinking about the future, instead of mourning the past. Elaine walked into Larry's hospital room holding her mother's hand. And when she spoke, she used a word she'd been saving. 3 days post-surgery, Larry's second recovery was slower, harder. His body fighting to heal what had already been compromised. Patricia hadn't left the hospital except to shower at Ruth's apartment and change clothes. She'd become a fixture in the hallways, the woman who measured time in monitor beeps and doctor rounds. Ruth brought Elaine at 2 p.m. when visiting hours technically started, though the nurses had stopped enforcing rules for this family weeks ago. Elaine stood in the hallway, nervous. She held something behind her back, clutched tight in both hands. Her eyes were wide, serious with that old soul weight she carried. Ready? Patricia asked gently. Elaine nodded. They walked to the doorway together. Elaine stopped there, mirroring the moment Larry had first seen her on Christmas Eve, frozen by the weight of what was about to change. Larry was awake, propped up on pillows, still pale, still bandaged, but his eyes were clear. When he saw Elaine, he smiled, weak but genuine. Hey, kiddo. Mom said you got sick because you saved me. Elaine's voice was small, careful. I'd do it again, Larry said without hesitation. That's what dads do, right? The words hung in the air. Patricia's breath caught. Larry went completely still. Elaine took 3 steps into the room, pulled her hand from behind her back. A drawing. Crayon on construction paper. 3 figures holding hands. A tall woman with dark hair, a small girl in the middle, a tall man with kind eyes. Above them in careful letters. My family. Elaine held it up. Can I call you Dad now? Larry broke, not quietly, not with dignity. He broke the way dams break, suddenly, completely, 9 years of grief and regret and gratitude pouring out in tears he didn't try to hide. He nodded because he couldn't speak. Elaine took another step closer. Dad? Larry's voice came out destroyed, barely a whisper. Yeah, baby? Don't get sick again. Elaine's chin trembled. I just got you. I won't. I promise. Elaine climbed carefully onto the hospital bed, against every rule, but nobody stopped her. She curled into Larry's side, her head on his shoulder, careful of all the wires and tubes. Larry's arm came around her like he'd been doing it her whole life instead of 3 weeks. I drew it last week, Elaine murmured. I was waiting for the right time. This is the right time, Larry whispered into her hair. Within minutes, they were both asleep. Patricia stood at the foot of the bed watching them, her daughter and her father. The family that shouldn't exist, but somehow did. She covered her mouth with both hands, turned and fled to the hallway. Ruth found her there, back against the wall, silently sobbing. You okay? Ruth's arms came around her. I don't know what I'm doing, Ruth. Patricia's words came out broken. I don't know if I'm protecting her or punishing him or you're doing what you've always done. Loving her first. But what if I... Patricia stopped. What if you what? Patricia looked at her sister, finally saying the thing she'd been too afraid to name. What if I want him back? Ruth smiled softly. Then maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself for wanting something good. Evening came. Ruth took Elaine to the cafeteria for dinner, then brought her back. Elaine curled up in the chair beside Larry's bed, wrapped in a hospital blanket, asleep again. Patricia and Larry were alone for the first time since the surgery. Larry spoke first, his voice still weak. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect us. I just want to be her dad. That's enough. Patricia stood at the window, arms crossed, looking out at the city lights. What if it's not enough for me? Larry went still, looked at her. Patricia turned to face him. What if I need to know you're not just here for her? What if I need to know that I'm here for you? Larry finished. Silence stretched between them, heavy with 9 years of history and 3 weeks of rebuilding. Patricia nodded. Larry struggled to sit up straighter. Patricia moved instinctively to help, adjusting his pillows. She stayed close. I've spent 9 years building things that don't matter, Larry said quietly. Towers, portfolios, legacy. Things that look impressive but don't keep you warm at night. Don't laugh at your terrible jokes. Don't make you want to be better just by existing. He looked at Elaine sleeping in the chair, then back at Patricia. But the only thing I ever built that matters is sleeping in that chair. And the only person who ever made me want to be better is standing in front of me. Patricia's eyes filled. I'm not here because of guilt. I'm here because I finally figured out what home means. What does it mean? Patricia whispered. You. It's always been you. Patricia closed the distance, leaned down, kissed him. Gentle, tentative, real. 9 years collapsed into one moment. Larry's hand came up to her hair, holding her there. The kiss deepened, then softened. When Patricia pulled back, tears streaked both their faces. I'm terrified, she admitted. Me too. If you leave again, I won't. Larry's voice was fierce despite its weakness. I swear on her life I won't. I'm done running, Patricia. I'm done choosing wrong. Patricia believed him. She could see it in his eyes. The man he'd become was different from the one who'd let her walk away. I love you, Larry said. I never stopped. I just forgot how to show it. But I'm remembering. Every day with her. With you. I'm remembering. I love you too, Patricia said. And saying it felt like breathing after holding her breath for 9 years. They sat like that, foreheads touching, hands intertwined, until a small voice broke the moment. Are you guys gonna get married? Elaine was awake, watching them with sleepy eyes and a knowing smile. Both adults laughed, surprised, caught, relieved. Slow down, baby, Patricia said. But you love him, right? Elaine pushed. Patricia looked at Larry, her hand still in his. Yeah, I do. And he loves you? Larry looked at Patricia like she was the only thing in the room worth seeing. More than anything. Elaine nodded, satisfied. Then it settled. In a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and second chances, a family that shouldn't have existed became the realest thing any of them had ever known. But the story wasn't over. Because happy endings aren't moments, they're choices you keep making. The Christmas tree lights blinked in Patricia's living room. No hospital this time, no monitors, just wrapping paper, laughter, and the sound of home. 1 year later. The tree was real this time. Larry's tradition. A 7-foot Douglas fir that dropped needles everywhere and filled the apartment with the smell of winter forests. Elaine had insisted on decorating every inch, resulting in a bottom-heavy masterpiece where all the ornaments a child could reach clustered together in chaotic joy. Christmas morning arrived with kitchen smells. Cinnamon rolls Patricia had actually managed not to burn, coffee brewing in the machine Larry had bought them, and the distinct scent of burnt toast from Larry's attempt to help. "I'm trying," he called from the kitchen. "Dad, the toaster has settings," Elaine shouted back, running between her room and the living room in pajamas covered with planets and stars. No beeping. Just living. Elaine dropped to her knees by the tree, attacking presents with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this moment since Thanksgiving. Art supplies. More fancy markers she didn't need but absolutely wanted. Books about space and astronauts. And a telescope, wrapped terribly in paper that didn't quite cover the box. She looked at Larry accusingly. "Dad, you wrapped this wrong." "I'm still learning," Larry admitted, sitting on the floor beside her. "You have lots of time," Elaine said simply, already tearing into the next package. Larry looked at Patricia over Elaine's head. Everything lived in that look. Gratitude, love, the quiet miracle of ordinary mornings. The previous week, Dr. Amara's office. 1 year post-transplant exams. The scans Patricia had been dreading. The blood work that would tell them if their miracle was holding. Dr. Amara had smiled before speaking. Always a good sign. Both healthy. Liver function completely normal. No signs of rejection. No complications. Patricia's hand had found Larry's. Squeezed. "Your medical miracles," Dr. Amara had said. "Both of you." Elaine had looked up from the tablet she'd been playing on. "We match." Dr. Amara's smile had softened. "Yes, you do." Back to Christmas morning. Wrapping paper covered the floor like colorful snow. Larry attempted to make a trash bag out of newspaper while Elaine explained the constellations she'd see with her new telescope. "Orion's belt is the easiest," she lectured. 3 stars in a row. "Dad, did you know stars are actually suns?" "I did not know that," Larry lied, because watching her explain was better than knowing. The year had been built on moments like this. Larry teaching Elaine to ride a bike, running behind her with one hand on the seat until the moment he let go, and she flew. Patricia and Larry's first real date. Not a hospital, not physical therapy, but an actual restaurant where they talked for 3 hours and remembered why they'd fallen in love the first time. Family dinners where Larry's cooking attempts ranged from surprisingly edible to let's order pizza. School plays where Larry sat front row every single time, applauding loudest when Elaine played tree number 3. Scars healing, both the surgical ones that faded to silver lines and the emotional ones that softened with time and consistency. After the present frenzy ended, Elaine suddenly got serious. "I have a present for you guys." She handed them an envelope, carefully sealed with stickers. Patricia opened it. Inside was a drawing. Elaine's best work yet. Patricia in a white dress. Larry in a suit. Elaine between them in a yellow dress, throwing flowers. A church in the background. Hearts everywhere. At the top, our wedding. "I've been planning," Elaine announced proudly. Larry laughed. Patricia's eyes filled with tears and amusement in equal measure. "Elaine, you love each other, right? So you should get married. That's how it works." Later, after Elaine crashed from sugar and excitement, napping on her bed surrounded by new books, Patricia and Larry sat on the couch. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of Christmas music and distant neighborhood sounds. "She's not subtle," Larry said. "She's 8, Patricia countered. "She's not wrong." Patricia looked at him. Larry turned to face her fully. I'm not proposing because she drew it, he said carefully. I'm proposing because I wake up every day grateful I'm alive, and I'm alive because of you. Both of you. He took her hand. Marry me. Not because it's neat. Not because it's what people do. But because I want every Christmas for the rest of my life to look like this. I want burnt toast and terrible wrapping paper and a daughter who corrects my astronomy. I want you. Patricia was quiet. Long enough that Larry's heart started to race. Then she smiled. Ask me again in 6 months. Larry blinked. That's not a no. It's a prove you mean it. Patricia squeezed his hand. I believe you, Larry. But I need you to believe you. I need you to wake up in 6 months and still want this. Still want us. Not because it's new and shiny, but because it's real and hard and worth it. Larry exhaled. Nodded. I can do 6 months. I know you can, Patricia said, and kissed him softly. Ruth arrived at 4 p.m. for Christmas dinner, carrying wine and the sweet potato casserole Patricia had requested. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Elaine showing Larry her telescope, Patricia laughing at something ridiculous, wrapping paper still scattered everywhere. Later, in the kitchen while they prepared dinner, Ruth said quietly, You did it. You let yourself hope. Terrifying, isn't it? Patricia admitted. Best kind of terrifying, Ruth replied. Evening came with full stomachs and tired contentment. The Christmas lights cast soft colors across the living room. Patricia dimmed the lamps. They settled on the couch, Elaine between Patricia and Larry, to watch an old holiday movie Elaine had seen 5 times, but insisted they watch again. 10 minutes in, Elaine fell asleep. Her head dropped to Larry's shoulder, her new book sliding from her lap. Patricia's head found Larry's other shoulder. Larry looked down at both of them, the 2 people who'd saved him from a life that looked successful, but felt empty. He whispered to the room, to himself, to whoever was listening. I'm home. Patricia's voice, internal, wrapping up their story. People ask if I forgive him. That's the wrong question. Forgiveness isn't one moment, it's 1,000 small choices. It's choosing to let someone prove they've changed, choosing to trust again, choosing to believe that people can grow into who they were always supposed to be. Larry gave Elaine life twice, once when she was born, once when she was dying. But she gave him something, too. She gave him a reason to become the man he was always capable of being. And me, I learned that second chances aren't about rewriting the past. They're about refusing to let the past write your future. This story isn't about what we lost. It's about what we saved. Elaine stirred awake during the movie credits, blinked sleepily. Mom? Yeah, baby? This was the best Christmas ever. Patricia kissed her head, breathing in the scent of her daughter's shampoo and the pine from the tree and the particular smell of home they'd built together. Yeah, Patricia said. It was. 3 people, 1 family, still learning, still healing, still choosing each other.